Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell, the podcast all about comedy. You know, the oldest recorded joke in British history is Anglo-Saxon, dating from the 10th century, and it is, what hangs at a man's thigh and wants to poke the hole it's often poked before? A key! Yes, that proves two things. One, cocks are funny, and two, probably time we thought of something else. I love talking to the people in comedy about comedy, and if you like to hear what they have to say as much as I do, then please like, subscribe, rate, review and share the podcast. Thank you. As this is the landmark 50th episode, I decided this would be an excellent opportunity to talk to one of my absolute favourite comedians. But as they weren't available, I'm instead talking to my guest today, who is an Austrian comedian performing stand-up in the UK and across the globe since 2017. He has a very relaxed style and a very dark humour that I enjoy enormously. And despite his often bleak material, as this conversation will attest, he's a lot of fun to be around. It's stand-up comedian Hubert Mayr.
Hi, mate.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Really good, really good. How is Austria?
Yeah, well, same old. It's it's all right. It's such a contrast to when I'm in London. It's just insane. It's like I'm in the middle of nowhere. There's no one around.
Sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
Let's go on with it, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
So obviously you've come over to the UK from Austria. What prompted that? What prompted the move?
Well, that was 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've heard this in my material already, but I was with my girlfriend at the time for like 7 years, and she literally just suggested, "Oh, let's spend a year abroad,"
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest move, because the UK was still in the EU then, was to go to London for a bit.
Yeah.
So the idea was to go to London for a year. We moved to London. I already had a job waiting for me. Then she found one, and then after a year, we were like, oh, that year's gone by way too quick. So let's tack on another half a year. Did that twice, I think, and then we broke up. and then I decided to just stay, for a bit. I wanted to stay for another year or so, just like sort of enjoy London as a single man. And then, now it's 12 years later. Yeah. Still here, still single.
Oh, we all.
Yeah.
Coming over from Austria, is there a comedy scene in Austria? Were you aware of it even?
There never used to be, like not like there is in English-speaking countries in terms of like stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a sort of like an open mic you could go to just like bang out 5 minutes of material and see if you like doing it.
Right.
There is a sort of like stand-up comedy. We call it cabaret, like cabaret. But you don't work up from like 5 minutes of material until you have an hour. It's more, you write an hour and then you try and get booked at like theaters and stuff like immediately.
Wow.
So you skip a few steps.
Yeah.
And there's a few Austrian comedians that I actually still really, really like. That was my first touch point with comedy, was actually Austrian comedians that then became famous, like German-speaking actors at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing like the UK. Now there is. There's a couple open mics. Even I'm where I am right now is near Salzburg. There's a couple open mics in Salzburg, even like English-speaking ones. So lots of expats go there. Yeah. And then in Vienna, there's a quite a big comedy scene at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone knows everyone, but considering it's Austria, it's a big scene.
It's a bit of a big scene with 8 comedians.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. That's what it is. I did a gig once, like in 2020, I think it was. So that was full on COVID times. But I was over here in August of 2020, and I didn't even think about doing comedy while I was here. But I don't know if you know Victor Petrascan, Romanian comedian, right? And he's been all over Europe, and he saw that I was in Austria, and he just messaged the local promoter, and he was like, "Oh yeah, put this guy on. He's in Austria at the moment." And I was like, "All right, I'll do it then." And that was a weekly show. Yeah, they did in like a coffee house in Salzburg, and I turned up, and it was rammed. It was like there was 75 people in. I thought this was going to be one of those where there's like 2 people that didn't even know there was comedy on, just people that have comedy thrust upon them instead of seeking it out. And yeah, it was like at the same acts every week, apparently. There was like 4 acts on. And then I got to do like 20 minutes, and I got like 3 applause breaks, standing ovations and stuff just because I had actual jokes written. It was like a really weird experience because like obviously it's the same acts every week, like trying out new material every week. That's pretty much all they do. You know, not to take away from anything they do, but it's just like once you've been on the London circuit for a bit, then you know, it just like hones your skill a little bit better.
Yeah. But I guess that when you're on the circuit, you know, you know Jamie and Alex and Rich and these people, so you kind of hang out. You kind of have to in some cases, but but there are other people you might not see for a year going around. So
yeah. I mean, and also when you start, then you have your generation of comics that you started with, like you know, the new intake, and then you kind of lose track after that with all the new acts that come on and stuff. Yeah.
Did you find that the sense of humor was different or is different?
No, not at all. That's what I found. I mean, that's something I was going to bring up on this podcast anyway. It's like Austria in general, people have a really dark sense of humor.
Right.
It's like one of the things when people say what's the difference between Austria and Germany, that's one of the things I bring up usually. Like those comedians I mentioned, the Austrian ones, it's really dark stuff. And the films, like the comedy films we have here, they're incredibly dark and depressing.
Yeah.
But hence my comedy. So no, they have the same sense of humor as I do. So yeah, no, I found it quite easy gigging in Austria actually. I've got a gig coming up in like 2 weeks as well. I'm gonna go to Vienna and well, we'll see. Maybe it's changed, but it worked then.
So did the sense of humor that you found in London, was that a surprise at how different it was, or was it? I mean, we're talking about your comedy among Austrian comedy, the dark humor.
Yeah,
but it's not all dark humor in London. It's quite broad, isn't it? Did you find that?
Yes, I mean, I didn't know what to expect really when I started, and I checked out a few open mics and just watched the acts, and there was all kinds of stuff. I mean, there wasn't really anything all that dark. I don't think what I do is all that dark either, but like I didn't even think that, oh, I'm gonna slide tackle in here with some really dark jokes or anything like that. I just wrote what I thought was funny to me, and then just basically I just wanted to see if a UK audience will like it or not. And luckily they did on my first gig. I don't think if they hadn't, I don't think I'd be doing comedy today.
But what was it that made you want to do comedy to begin with?
Yeah, it's a weird story with me. Because there's people who think about it for a long time. With me, it was a guy I worked with. We went to the pub like 3 times a week, and like just a small group of friends from work, and we were both big stand-up comedy fans. I mean, for me, it was mostly American comedy. So it was like I think I'd really gotten into Bill Burr at the time or something like that.
Yeah,
and we talked stand-up quite a bit, and one day drunkenly we just said, hey, do you want to do an open mic at some point? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I kind of we had another mate there who was like, yeah, you're never gonna do that, you know, this is just empty talk. So what we started doing was like just going to open mics in London, just to check them out, like basically scout locations, where could we actually go on stage. And we went to a couple that were just absolutely atrocious. I mean, that's gigs that you would do later on, but that's not something where you want to start really. So we found the Cavendish Arms in Stockwell, that you probably know, which has probably been mentioned on this podcast quite a bit, I would assume.
Comedy Virgins.
Comedy Virgins, exactly. And we went to that and we watched it, and it was like, this is actually really great, nice supportive night. Obviously it's a bringer. So you have to bring friends to be able to perform, but we were like, okay, let's do it here. And I think I wrote for months because it took a while for us to get like spots. And then I wrote for months, and I think what I had actually was about half an hour of absolutely dogshit material. and then like a week before then I was in Austria, and I thought, you know, this is all shit. I need to actually write some jokes. So I just deleted it all. And I went like, I wouldn't call it hack, but I was like, I have to just talk. Like, I thought I was going to be like a George Carlin up there, but obviously that's not what you do. That's not what you do when you start comedy. So I just wrote a bunch of jokes, like really, really hacky jokes about Austria. I still have the video of my first gig as well. And yeah, it was. We ended up going. It was just going to be me and that friend who also performed that night, and 2 friends, because we had to bring friends to perform. Unfortunately, those 2 friends betrayed us and told everyone in the company, essentially. So like 15 people showed up to watch our first ever stand-up gig. 15 people we knew. I have the video still. It's never going to see the light of day. I went on stage. I didn't even take the mic out of the stand because I didn't know how. I thought I was going to fuck that up. So I just like walked up and talked into the microphone for 5 minutes, and it was decent. I was in the clap off at the end.
Yeah.
So that's what made me keep going then, because I was like, oh, there's something in this. And I think I did Comedy Virgins again as my second gig, and that's I won Best Act of the Night then, and that's when I really thought like, all right, let's just go for this and like actually do comedy.
Did you get like what were the nerves like doing it for the first time?
Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, I think I was about 8 pints deep by the time I went on stage. I was so absolutely hammered, but I had to be, because I was so nervous. I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. And before then, like, I had to do a few like company presentations and stuff like that in my day job, and I was always nervous, like with public speaking and stuff like that.
Right.
So this was like, that was the worst thing ever, and I was so drunk. I can't even tell on the video. I think the adrenaline like sort of had canceled out the booze.
Right.
So I'm not slurring my words or anything like that. But then that was probably not the best way to start comedy, because then I thought, oh, I have to drink before I go on stage. Right. And I did that like for a year before I ever did a gig sober. I had a few drinks before every single gig in my first year. And my first year I did like 150 gigs because I really, really went for it. And always the nerves were horrendous. I don't know what other people have told you on this podcast. Were there people that just like on their first gig they were like, nah, I'm gonna smash this, or is everyone nervous?
Pretty much everyone's the same.
Oh, okay.
In fact, you'd be
everyone is as hammered as me.
Well, no. They were very, very nervous. They chose different ways of addressing it, I would say.
Oh, okay.
It's surprising how many people say they were tricked into it. Like someone else booked them on the bill.
Oh, really?
Including Alex, who you know.
She was tricked into it?
So she claims.
I should really talk to that woman at some point.
Yeah. You know your friends. You should probably have a conversation with them one day.
I don't like talking to them.
That's fair enough. So was it everything that you expected? What were the biggest surprises about becoming a comedian?
No, I actually went into it with I think it was the right mindset, because like there's plenty of people who go into it and immediately expect success. Like they do their first open mic and immediately have a professional comedian Facebook page or something like that. Right. I've met loads of those people. For me, it was always like, and I think it's because I listened to like Bill Burr's podcast or something. Right. And he said every time someone like writes into the podcast and asks, how do you go about starting comedy? He always says, write 5 minutes of shit you think is funny, sign up to an open mic. When they call your name, go up, hang on for dear life, and then see if you like it. And if you like it, then do it more and more and more. I never expected to have any sort of considerable success for the first 5 years. Anyway, I mean, it's now 5 years later and it's still not happened. But I know I'm not like, I didn't expect much from it. I just really enjoyed doing it from day one. There were some setbacks. I think there was like Comedy Virgins does the best act competition every night, basically. Yeah. I went and did a Rising Star one night, which is a similar concept, and I won best act of the night with material I had just written. I was like, oh, this must be gold then. But I think it was just like the right night for what I did, and I was like, this is absolute gold. So I remember some Monday I saw on Facebook there's another gig on in Hammersmith, and like you can just turn up and go up because there's spots open, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna do that. So after work I just went there, and there was even a decent like size crowd. There was probably like 20 people, and the mic didn't work. Yeah. And I was still brand new, but I was like, oh, this material is foolproof anyway. So I went up and I bombed so hard, like you wouldn't even believe. Like there was like crickets would have been too loud. I threw all that material away immediately after that. But yeah, it was. But even after that, I thought, okay, because I already in my head I was already expecting stuff like that to happen, because you're gonna bomb. Every comedian bombs. So I was like, that's fine. I'm gonna keep going. I'll just do other gigs. So yeah. It was, but yeah, it was pretty much what I expected it to be. There's certain things about the industry and just the comedy circuit in general that I didn't expect as much, but more like, like infighting and like cliques and I don't know, and just the sheer number of creeps on the circuit. I mean, that was new. I didn't expect that. That was all pre Louis C.K. So that was I didn't know.
Did you have a style in mind when you started out? Did you think this is the kind of comedian that I wanted to be, or did it just come sort of natural?
Well, yeah, I had a style in mind at the beginning where, like I said, I was a big fan of like opinionated American comedians.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote some anti-religion joke at the beginning and stuff like that. I was going to be, I'm going to be the smart guy on stage. And then I realized, you know what? I haven't learned that. Like, once you have a following, you can play around with your style a little bit, I would assume. But I found out I was that's what I actually did. I think in my first year, at one point, I was like, I need to write 5 minutes of actual jokes, and I did that. And that's when I started like doing really well in competitions and stuff like that. And it was still comedy I enjoy doing and like stuff I enjoy saying.
Yeah,
I just wasn't that fucking preacher on stage that I imagined myself at the beginning. So I had a style in mind, and it's not exactly what I'm doing now, but I actually found that the style that I'm doing now is more suitable to me, and I actually enjoy doing it more. So it all worked out fine.
Is it because you're being more yourself? I talk to people about the person that they play on stage, and whether it's themselves, if it's an honest reflection of themselves. Is that the case for you, or is it? Are you playing an amped up version of you, or a character of you?
Yeah, I would say it's an I don't know. It's an amplified version of me. Yeah. I'm not the most positive person in the world. I don't know if you've noticed that. I have a very cynical view of everything, and that's sort of what I do. So it's a bit of an amplified version, because off stage, I'm not constantly just going on about wanting to kill myself. But it makes for a good punchline. So there you go. No. I would say it's an amplified version of myself. Yeah. And lately I've started. I mean, you saw my preview, for example, at 2 North Down. I've started doing more actual stories from my life and stuff like that. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, while I try and work up a good hour. So yeah, it is pretty much myself. I'm not playing a character, I wouldn't say.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things where loads of other comedians have done comedy courses, right? I've never done one. At this point, it's become a point of pride for me, where it was just stupid, because like I think you can get something from them, obviously, and if you do there's courses out there where they help you punch up your jokes or just work out your stage persona and stuff like that, where they tell you this is how you come across to the audience, and this is how you use that knowledge. So every once in a while you might write a joke that doesn't quite fit into your character that people perceive when you're on stage, and then it doesn't work. So the courses, they help with that sort of stuff, and that's what people have told me. But again, I'm too prideful at this point to do a comedy course, so I'm just trying to really work out what it is that people see when I'm on stage, and then try and sort of tailor my material to that as well, so it's one coherent set or show.
Yeah. So
I can't all of a sudden wear a lampshade and talk about what's the deal with end tables. I mean, it's not. That's not who I am.
Although I would watch that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll do it.
Well, let's talk about feedback then that you get, because obviously, if you're not getting feedback from a comedy course, do you video yourself and watch yourself back? Do you talk with your peers who come and see your shows?
I used to film myself, then record audio of myself.
Yeah,
I did that for a hot 3 months, I think, before I lost interest. I mean, I should do it a lot more, just in the age of Instagram, so you can put up reels and stuff. But just in general, no. I just don't do it anymore. Like even my work in progress, I didn't film, which was stupid because I really should have done. But I don't know, the nerves got to me and I was like, I can't deal with this camera shit right now. I just got to go do the show. But in terms of feedback, obviously you get feedback from your comedy peers. And instant feedback from the audience. When I started, I think in the generation of comics I started with on the London circuit, I think I may have been probably the darkest one there. So I got a lot of feedback on that. But then I also got feedback that told me there's something about you on stage that enables you to get away with more than others.
Right.
It's not I don't say offensive stuff. You know, it's just darker stuff.
Yeah.
And somehow it works. And it's weird. Like that's the feedback I got then. And then I started doing well in competitions, and I had this weird thing where in my first year in comedy, essentially in 2018, I made it to the final of the Leicester Square New Comedian of the Year competition. And I thought, for one, already I didn't expect that. Because I was like, this is the stuff I say is way too dark for this. and then I submitted basically the clip, the 5 minutes audio recording from the Leicester Square Theatre show from the final to the BBC for the New Comedy Awards. And then I got into a heat, so I got through to the first stage of that. And I was like, that's the BBC. I was like, it didn't even give me, like, back then the only rule they had was you can't curse, like you can't swear. And I was like, okay, well, they're actually right then. That's cool.
That's 3 minutes off the material.
Yeah. No, I don't swear on stage. I work clean. It's just darker. And I don't know, I did that heat, and it was up the creek comedy club. They'd taken all the tables out, so they made it like theater style seating, and there was like 400 people in, and it was an amazing night. So that's basically, I thought, you know, I must be doing something right if I get stuff like that with the jokes that I do. Oh, actually, then they broadcast that show on Radio 4, and when I listened to it, they had cut one of my jokes out. I think one of them may have gone too far. But yeah, overall, that's basically all the feedback I got, was either instant or audience feedback or promoter feedback or feedback from my peers. And then like the successes in competitions, I thought, okay, clearly there's something, I'm doing something right, so I'm not going to change course too much.
How do you feel about competitions in general? I mean, including like ones on the night, like a Gong show and things like that, or the national contest. How do you feel about those sorts of things?
I don't know, mixed feeling. I mean, I had some of my best experiences in comedy were probably competitions. I mean, the semi-final for So You Think You're Funny, which you can only do in your first year, and you do that in Edinburgh. So obviously that was a huge experience. I thought it was great. Like I said, BBC, the Leicester Square New Comedian. So I really enjoyed doing those. Probably because of the success. I mean, when you in your first year get to play to like 500 people in Leicester Square Theatre, it's insane. It was so cool for a really new comedian. But I don't know. In general, I don't think I don't want to lose my spot in any competitions by saying this, but a comedy shouldn't really be a competition. It should just be an expression of what you want to do, and then see if people like it. Ideally. But then I don't know, like I'm not a huge fan of Gong shows either. Like every comedy club has Gong shows, right? Like it's the Comedy Store has King Gong, Up the Creek has a Blackout, which is every week. Then Backyard has one now. Comedy Knockout, I think it's called. Top Secret has one. So the big 4 comedy clubs in London all have Gong shows, and it's one of the easiest ways to get in with that comedy club. I mean, other than that, it's via connections or you just get lucky. I know comedians who just like the Comedy Store booker saw them on some random night where they were in a pub and then decided to book them. Like,
right.
For me, with the Comedy Store, for example, I've done a few middle spots now. I've got another one in November, and I hope I get some paid work after that. for me, it was King Gong.
Yeah.
And again, that was in my first year of comedy, and it was I think it was even more pints than my first ever open mic, because that's the most daunting thing you can do as a comedian. I mean, some people aren't affected by it. I think if I had absolutely bombed on my first Gong show, I probably wouldn't be around. I don't know. But I was lucky. First King Gong, I went up and I opened with that joke that the BBC cut out of the broadcast, and that's the sort of audience that likes that sort of stuff. So I went up with that, and I basically, if you open with a good joke at a Gong show like that, you buy yourself a minute easy.
Yeah.
Like if you get a big laugh at the top, then you buy yourself a minute. And I think I was doing well. And then at like 3 minutes, I told there was someone like I did a setup to a joke that took a little bit longer, and it was obviously quiet. And some guy in the front row booed me. Right. And just one guy, right? Yeah. And I just basically went, "Oh, yeah, go fuck yourself." And that got a huge applause, and like they were like, "Oh, cool, he's giving him shit back." But then all of a sudden, like the first card went up. So I assume people that listen to your podcast know what a Gong show is by now. So 3 cards go up, you have to leave the stage.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like 3 cards were up, and I was like 3.5 minutes into the set, and I got gonged off. And as I walk off stage, everyone's booing. And I thought they were booing me.
Oh, right.
So I was like, I was already sitting down basically amongst the audience again. And I was like, can you guys stop booing me? Jesus Christ, I'm one of you now. I'm one of you again. Can you just focus on the next act? But it turned out like the whole room was booing the card holders.
Yeah. And
I think the guy who booed, who I told to go fuck himself, his girlfriend had a card. So her card went up. And I think, I don't know if the others just followed suit. I don't know what it was. But basically they kept booing, and the Gong master guy had to basically go, well, we have to bring him back on. So because the audience wants him back on. So I was already like relieved. I was like 3.5 minutes. I can live with that.
Yeah.
I sat back in my chair and I was like, that's fine. Okay, I can go home. That's fine. I survived the first Gong show. And they were like, "Oh no, please welcome back to the stage, Hubert Mayr. He has to do another minute and 35 seconds or whatever it was."
Yeah.
So I went up, and at that point you can't lose, because like they're not going to do it again.
Yeah.
They're not going to gong you up again. So I don't even know what I did. And then you have to do another minute in the final. You know, there's like a clap off, and then they identify like 4 or something finalists, and everyone has to do a minute, and then there's a final clap off. And I did okay. I don't think I got to my second punchline in that final minute. Didn't know how to budget time, but I got through. I survived the 5 minutes. Yeah. And then you're only allowed to do that show once every 6 months. So 6 months later, I signed up again, and I went again, and I just straight like beat the Gong. Yeah. Like, I did 5 minutes. Yeah. And but again, I didn't win best act of the night. So another comedian told me that night to just call him up the next day. So that's what I did. Called up the Comedy Store, and I still remember calling them and going, well, I just did King Gong last night. That was my second time. I beat it both times. Is there any way you can book me for like a trial spot? And I literally heard like the guy leafing through like a book, like you can hear like the pages turning, and he's like, it says here in March 2018 you did 3.5 minutes. I can't believe believe they keep meticulous records like that. And 2, I was like, yeah, but I got brought back on, so I finished the 5. And he was like, yes, I remember now. and then they booked me for a 5-minute spot, and I did that. And then on, you basically have to do 10-minute unpaid middle spots until you're deemed good enough to do a whole weekend. Yeah. But so Gong shows, I think there's, obviously for me it worked as a way in. But there was a time where I kept beating the blackout as well at Up the Creek. Yeah. I won it a couple times, and I thought, looks like I'm unbeatable in Gong shows. I'm just like I'm Gong show guy, so I'm just gonna go around and do all the Gong shows. And this was all pre-COVID, so the Comedy Store still had the Manchester club, and Manchester had a King Gong as well. So in London, it's every last Monday of the month or first Monday of the month. I can't remember. Yeah. And basically the Sunday before, it's in Manchester, or it was when the club still existed. So I was like, you know what? I don't care how broke I am. I'm just gonna go up to Manchester, where everyone says it's much friendlier. It's a much friendlier crowd. It's much easier to beat. I'm gonna go up there and win that fucking thing. So I booked a mega bus.
Yeah.
And I sat on a mega bus to Manchester for 6 hours to go do that Gong show, and I ended up doing a hot 40 seconds before I got.
Wow.
Yeah. That was just like everyone was hammered in the crowd. There was a group of lads on the side, and as I walked on and basically started by addressing the fact that I'm from Austria, they started doing like Schwarzenegger impressions and singing a song. No one could even hear my first punchline. And like 40 seconds later, or I don't know, a minute or something, I was gone. And then back to the mega bus.
Yeah. 6 hours back. Lovely.
Yeah, horrendous. Horrible. I would discourage anyone from doing comedy. Ruined my life. No. But yeah, that can be a blessing. But I think, do you know Dane Buckley?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like fairly new, right? I think he started comedy in 21.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
I mean, he just smashed every Gong show in the country, and like immediately, like so that propels you. Like it makes you skip lots of like horrendous stages of comedy if you're able to do that. But then I think lots of people take them too seriously, or and it's a whole different format. It's not a normal comedy night. Like people go there to be mean to the comedian. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah, you can't take it too seriously.
Should never put the power in the hands of the audience.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't know what they're doing.
They're morons.
They're not professionals. You mentioned COVID times, so let's talk about your lockdown experience then. So you got a few years on the circuit and then no circuit.
So I don't know how much you're gonna edit out.
Only the good stuff.
Or just in general, like because I could talk about this for probably an hour, but just in general, at the time, I'm gonna go back a little bit.
Sure.
When Jamie, who you've had on the podcast, I don't know if you've had Richard yet or if you're trying to book him, I don't know. But basically, in 2018, both Jamie and I quit our day jobs, right? And then we went to Edinburgh, and we did like a crazy amount of comedy for like nearly 2 weeks, and nearly died because we drank way too much.
Mm-hmm.
And so after that, I quickly found another day job, and Jamie struggled for a bit, and then we were both. There was a point where we were both just it's so insanely broke, you can't even believe. And then eventually, like at the end of 2019, we decided that we want to move. I'd lived in a flat like opposite Alex's in Shoreditch at the time, and I had to move out anyway because my housemates were moving. And then Jamie had a similar situation, and Richard was looking for a new flat as well. So we were like, okay, let's just build the comedy empire, and like the three of us move in together, right? And so we ended up moving. The short story is we ended up moving to Walthamstow in I want to say February 2020, maybe January. And we basically moved in together, and we were like, this is fucking brilliant. We're right by Walthamstow Central Station. Like we can just bang out gigs, come back home. It's all super easy transport links, and then it was lockdown time. And we hadn't even bought any furniture at that point. Like there was just like some sort of like casting couch in there. It was just drenched in cum, I think. And we spent the first few weeks in lockdown. I mean, obviously you couldn't go out and like buy furniture or anything. So Jamie had brought 3 camping chairs. And we were just like the biggest white trash flat you've ever seen in your life. Like, whereas there was a TV on a kitchen table that didn't even have any chairs with it. So we just set up the TV, and then we had 3 camping chairs in front of it, and we just sat there drinking beer, watching films. So it was pretty stupid. And then also I need to go back a bit, like because I said that was the short story. The long story, a longer story is. We had one day to view a bunch of flats in Walthamstow, and Jamie and Rich had already done that, so they'd seen a few flats.
Right.
But then we had another day. We had booked like 5 viewings or whatever, and we went to Walthamstow, met up there, went to the first viewing. Was an absolute hole, just absolute shithole of a flat. And we were like, we're not, we don't want to do this one. And we had an hour to kill before we had the next viewing, so we went to a pub and had a pint of Guinness. And after that pint of Guinness, those two said, you know what? We saw that one flat the other day. let's just have 6 Guinness instead of going to viewings. Let's cancel them all and let's just take that flat. And I was like, I trust you guys. It's probably a nice flat. It's fine. Let's move in there. Absolute fucking shithole. It was a ground floor flat. There was mice. There was like homeless people living next door in the bin room. We started calling them the bin boys because we heard them at night. And first time I took a bin bag out and I wanted to go to that bin store. I opened the door and then some guy just grabs the bag and goes like, "I'll take it." And I was like, "Oh, cool." Then there were rats. That became a huge problem in lockdown when there wasn't no people around anymore. So the rats just took over the neighborhood.
Wow. God almighty. It's only $1,400 a month.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it was more than that. And then
I was exaggerating for comic effect, but my God, it was more than that. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, between the three of us, total was more than that. But just in general with lockdown, as much as like all of that sucked in a way, I still remember at that point I was pretty burned out with comedy. I'll be honest. Like I'd worked a pretty stressful day job at the time. I gigged like 5 nights a week.
Yeah,
and it had burned me out to the point where when lockdown started, and I was like, okay, so Boris Johnson has just announced an actual national lockdown, and I looked at my diary and I started deleting all my gigs for any sort of like social obligation or gig. Just delete it for the next 3 months, and that was a feeling of elation I've not felt since. I don't think. It was incredible. Like all of a sudden, like as much as we were sitting in camping chairs, drinking cans of Stella, watching films, I had a great time because I was like, finally I can have actually like a good night's sleep, have some evenings in and stuff like that. I really needed it, so it was. In a way, it was good. But then I started doing online gigs and then the whole thing turned again. I actually had a great time doing online gigs. I didn't do many, but I smashed every single. I don't know what it is about it, but it's so much more freeform, and you don't necessarily think, Jesus Christ, I'm bombing right now. It's just you're doing an online gig, right?
Yeah.
So I did like a couple new material gigs where I got to ramble for 20 minutes. So I remember when I was in 21, I think I was stuck here in Austria, and from this room, which my mother calls the computer room, that's all it is. I mean, my brother and I had to share a room growing up, but yeah, the computer gets its own room. So I was in here and I did a gig for a comedy club in Vienna, actually, and it had like 200 viewership. The 2 MCs actually went to a studio and like they did like proper MCing, and obviously like if an online gig was set up right, then it was good because like everyone was told to unmute themselves and to not heckle, and then it was great. It was almost like a real gig but with less pressure. Like you can't I don't know, you don't bomb in front of a PC. It's just like it's a weird thing, and I really enjoyed doing it. Oddly. And then some of the online gigs I did were some of the best paid gigs I'd ever done. There was one where Richard and I did a shared 3 minutes, and we were both paid a 3-figure sum for that. So
wow,
at that time that was great. Yeah. Did you, as the comedy nerd, if I can ask a question back?
Yeah.
Did you watch a bunch of online stuff during lockdown?
Oh yeah, loads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you watch King Gong online? Because that was the most horrendous thing.
I hate Gong shows. I hate them.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
I really can't stand them at all.
I could see why. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're actually into comedy as an art form properly, then you wouldn't like Gong shows. I would assume.
A comedian has to see a Gong show as just a gig and take everything else out of it.
Yeah. You just said what I rambled on about without getting to the point, but the Reader's Digest
version. It's but I watched a lot of online stuff. I watched some of the ones that Cooperage and McLean did. I saw some of Alex's the Dulwich Hamlet ones.
Oh yeah. I was that's what Richard and I did, where we it was like, this is really cool. They made us do what was it like? Which one of us is the worst housemate, basically? So we had to slag each other off for 3 minutes, and it was really, really fun to do.
Yeah.
And did a couple of online roast battles as well at the time. Like,
Yeah.
that was that was rough. That was rough, but yeah, I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
you did anything to entertain yourself at that time.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. What it did do, Zoom, this amazing new miracle format that didn't exist before 2020, apparently.
They fucking crushed it, didn't they?
Yeah.
Can't believe they actually got rid of Skype. You remember when House Party was a thing for like 3 minutes?
Nope.
At the beginning of lockdown, everyone was like, you got to get on House Party. That was one of those mobile apps where you can just hang out on video chat. That died within 3 minutes.
Yeah, Zoom took over. But what it did do is it meant that I could now get involved in gigs in Australia and America, things I wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Yeah.
You know, live comedy from the US.
Yeah, that's really cool, actually. That's a cool aspect to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking that Zoom probably released that fucking virus.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone made that connection? I mean,
but also, I mean, from a positive note, also is it meant that people who wouldn't normally be able to go to comedy. I was saying this about the Leicester Festival, which was online in 2021, was entirely online. The Leicester Comedy Festival. It meant that people who wouldn't normally physically be able to go to comedy could suddenly have access to it because of accessibility issues or whatever. So that's a nice. You got to look at the positive spin on it.
There's a lot of positives to it, actually. That's what some online gigs are still going. I mean.
Yes, yeah.
It's become a part of the mix because of accessibility, and I think that's good. That's a really good thing. I expected a lot of good things to come out of the pandemic. Like when it comes to comedy, like the Fringe, for example, I thought, oh my God, this is gonna fix the Fringe. Because obviously there was no Fringe in 2020, then there was like the reduced Fringe in 21, and I was like, oh my God, they're gonna stop price gouging like crazy when it comes to accommodations and everything. And no, went the other way.
Yep.
Got even worse.
Oh, of course
it did. I don't know why I had a positive thought for one second.
You think a price will actually go down?
Yeah. Obviously, I was
how it works.
Yeah, I don't know what got into me. I think it was that whole fact where I deleted all those gigs and I was like, oh, I'm happy for the first time in 10 years.
Yeah.
And I started having positive thoughts. And obviously the world proved them wrong.
Yeah, so none of that. Get back to where you were before. Stop that.
Yeah, shut up. Give me $3,000 so you can perform.
Yeah. So Edinburgh, then let's talk about your festival experience. You did a split bill with another guy last year.
Some other guy.
How was your festival experience doing spots or doing your split bill?
Really good. That was actually my first time doing a show in Edinburgh, like my own show. I mean, it was with Jamie, obviously, but it was an actual show.
Yeah,
that we put on. So it's a whole new ball game because like when you start comedy, I mean, I'd gone up to Edinburgh in 2018 and did like 5 spots a day, but you're just part of mixed bills, right? And I went up for a week in 2019 and did a few spots and stuff like that. But then last year, it's such a weird thing when the first time in your comedy career people come to see you and like they don't come because it's a good comedy club and it's always a good night and like that's not the selling point. The selling point is they've come to see you. They either like your flyer or they've seen you online or you bribed them to come
or there was nothing else happening.
It
was raining outside. Lots of reasons.
I mean, you obviously you saw the venue we were in. It wasn't the best. It was a challenging venue, and we had a challenging time. So we were assigned the last slot of the night because apparently the lads can deal with it. That's what we were told.
Wow.
Because it was a very boozy pub. But with a lot of people had colds. Like people there was a lot of sniffling going on. Let's put it that way. And so it was like the weekday shows were challenging at times because you would get like between 5 and 10 people in at most. We got people in that were just coked out of their minds. We got a guy who just started doing coke while he was sitting there listening to us. There were hecklers. There were people that have fallen asleep. There were just like people that were really difficult to deal with. But I don't even see that as a negative because it taught me a lot about like I had to adjust my style completely night night on night. I can't remember which day you came. Was it a shit one or was it a good one?
It was a good one. It was a full room, and both of you were on good form, so I got lucky, I guess.
Oh, was that a weekend? Was it? I think it may have been.
I don't know. All the days are the same to me.
Okay, we get it. Yeah. So yeah, on weekends we had really good shows. I mean, there was one on that Saturday where Jerry Sadowitz's show got cancelled.
Right. Yeah.
By the venue, if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
We had a completely rammed room. It was about 70 degrees in there at that point because like everyone was just sweating. Horrible. I mean, it was only separated from the main bar area by a curtain.
Yeah.
But that night, and I think it may have been the one you came to. I'm not sure, but it was absolutely rammed. Like standing room only. I mean, not even standing room. Like people were standing outside that curtain to listen in.
Yeah.
And
it might have been that
it may have been one of the best shows I'd ever done in my life at that point. And I still see it as a success, as like because Jamie and I are just giant pieces of shit and just like a bit too lazy for our own good. So most people, when they do a free French show, and especially a split bill, and late at night at not the best venue possibly, they have to pull a show at one point when we didn't have to pull a single one because we got people in every single time.
Yeah.
One Monday where it was absolutely pissing it down outside, and it was just like we were sitting in that pub, our venue, watching football, and we were like, you know what, I'm not going out flyering in this. And the main way to get people in, obviously in Edinburgh, is flyering, especially if you do a free French show, no PR, no nothing.
Yeah.
And we were like, you know what, if we're gonna pull a show, it's gonna be tonight. So let's just not, let's just not really put any effort into it. And I went to the front door. I still went to the front door, and I was like, if people come in to the pub, I'm gonna give them a flyer and just say we have a show at like 10:30.
Yeah.
Come in if you fancy it. And then like loads of people came in, and as I tried to flyer them, they were like, no, we're already here to see you. And I was like, what? Why? But it was just the Pleasance down the road had let out a bunch of shows, and it was raining so heavily. People had that wee blue book from PBH, and they just saw that there's a show that starts in like 15 minutes, half an hour, just like 5 minutes down the street. So that's why they came. They were like, they wanted to get out of the rain and see a show, and that was an incredible show.
Yeah.
It was full. We didn't have to do anything for it. It was full. We had a couple insanely drunk old people in the middle of the room, where one of them started falling asleep, and I think we did maybe 50% of our material. The rest was crowd work and just fucking around. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
And before that, Edinburgh, I had always refrained from doing crowd work or talking to the crowd as much as I can.
Yeah.
Because like I was like, I need to stick to my material. It's not my native tongue, so I might not be as quick-witted as other people. So I was like, and then that completely turned there. Like I learned so much there. It was an insane experience. There's a legendary show at the French called Wrong Comedy. I don't know if you know about it.
Yeah.
Bob Walsh is the promoter, lovely guy, and he was the one who in 2018, when I was a brand new comic, some people recommended me to him. So it's like, I don't want to call it a free speech comedy night. It's just like it's the darkest shit that people have. It's like even people that normally don't do material like that can go to that night and just try out jokes they'd written, but then decided I can't actually. It's a really, really nice night, and it's just, you can say whatever the fuck you want type thing. And it's more like, so I got recommended for that, and then Bob genuinely, he was like, you can do every night. So in 2018 I went up and I started doing 5 minutes, and after like 2 shows where I did 5, he said you can do 10 every night. Like I got to close every night, and Jamie got to open every night. So we were like, we had the best time. So and Bob messaged me asking me if I'm going to be in Edinburgh and if I can do Wrong Comedy again. I because it clashed with our show last year, Jamie and mine, I could only do it. I did it twice.
Right.
Like once I basically made Jamie MC at the top and then do his bit first, so I can go and do Wrong Comedy first.
Right.
And then another night, our show was already done. Our run was already done, and I got to do it.
Right.
But I'd really love to do that again because I have some jokes that I used to do on the circuit. that I don't do anymore. That is a bit too much. And then I genuinely came back from Edinburgh last year thinking I'm gonna immediately start working on my hour, and I'm gonna do my hour this year.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. I'm not going to Edinburgh this year. I'm just gonna work out the best hour that I can, and then do it next year. Debut next year.
Yeah. You mentioned briefly a minute ago English not being your first language, but you perform comedy in German as well. Do you do different jokes? Do you do the same jokes? Do they work in translation because of linguistic differences? How does that work?
Actually, yeah, no, you can't do. It's the languages are so different. Like,
yeah,
I've not done comedy. Like, I started doing comedy in English. I didn't do comedy in German until last year. I did. Right. I recorded a roast battle for Comedy Central Germany. Mm-hmm. It's on Amazon Prime now. I got it via another comedian, Leila Dari. She's fantastic, but she's now Switzerland based. So she's German speaking, but we knew each other from the circuit, and she had done one already. And Germany has a I don't know if you can guess, but a very small comedy scene. And
it's one comedian, Henning Venn. That's it.
No, so basically, she had done one already, and if you do well, they might come back to you and say, hey, in the next season, do you want to do another one?
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing as it is in the UK. I don't know if you've seen the Comedy Central roast battles, but yeah, it's like the same studio and everything,
right? In
terms of like the layout and everything.
Yeah.
And she could pick her opponent, so she suggested me. Because I had done a lot of roast battles in the UK, and like we knew each other quite well. And I was like, "What, Leila? I can't even send those producer people a clip of me doing comedy in German. Like, I don't have one." I sent them a 10-minute video of me doing the Comedy Store, and I thought like they're just going to be like, "Nah, we need someone, who has like German comedy experience." And they were like, "Yeah, fantastic." They basically told me there's a bunch of like Z-list celebrities at this point that they use, and that they have a writer's room that write the jokes for them and stuff like that. And I didn't. They were like, "Yeah, you at least don't need that. Like, you can actually write a joke." But that was my first time being on stage in Germany. It was for national TV immediately, and you had to memorize 15 jokes. And then there's an added difficulty for me. I mean, I guess it's the same for Leila, but there's an added difficulty for me is that I'm from Austria, and I grew up speaking a very, very heavy dialect. So I essentially already spoke 2 languages before I spoke English, because the dialect is so, like, if I speak to anyone from Germany and how I grew up speaking, anyone from Germany who's not from Bavaria, if they're like from further north, they wouldn't even understand. Like, they can't follow what I'm saying. So you on TV, you obviously have to speak proper German. So that's an added difficulty. So I had to do that, and I had to memorize 15 jokes. Like, it's like, I think it was 5 rounds of 3 jokes each. So I had to memorize 15 jokes, and then ideally you'd have a few comebacks as well.
Right.
And it was, that was probably, since I started comedy, the most daunting experience I'd ever had in my life. But it was really good. Alex actually came to Berlin with me.
Oh, wow.
She actually came to the taping as well. I was in a giant comedy club in Berlin called Quatsch Comedy Club, probably the biggest comedy club in Germany. And she was there. She was just there to support. She was like, "Oh yeah, you did well." I was like, "How the fuck would you know?" But yeah, so that was my first time doing comedy in German, and you cannot translate English jokes into German. Like, I mean, people, I suppose some of them you probably can, but I suppose because I've lived in the UK for so long, my brain actually thinks in English for the most part. So if I think of a joke, even if it's for a roast battle, I'm like, "Oh, this is the joke. This is what I'm going to do." And then I have to actually sort of like translate it into German, and I started writing it. And I was like, I can't find a grammatically correct way here to put the punchline at the end. It's just not.
Right.
It's just not possible in this language.
Yeah.
So I abandoned a couple of joke ideas where I was like, I would love this idea. It would work in English. It just doesn't work in German. So you can't. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And my general like club set, I don't think I would use. And maybe like 20% of it I could probably translate into German. It would still work, but I'd write all new stuff.
Yeah.
I hosted a German gig in London shortly before I came over here.
Right.
Where I booked. I basically wanted to put on a German language night, and I was the MC. And I wrote a bunch of like pre-prepared like bits and stuff. for my emceeing bit, but all brand new because like I couldn't really go with any of my jokes.
Yeah.
And then I ended up booking one German guy and one Austrian girl.
Yeah.
Alice Frick,
Yeah.
fantastic comedian. And then a Scottish woman and an English woman.
Yeah.
But they spoke German well enough that they wanted to try their hand at like German speaking comedy. It was actually quite a good night.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it doesn't work. I think that's where maybe some of the stereotype about Germans comes from. I don't know where. Maybe that's it. I don't know what it is, but I always thought English lends itself way, way more to comedy, just as a language. In terms of how the grammar is structured, it's a much, much richer vocabulary. I mean, in German, you have the compound word, so you can just create a word that takes you a minute to say from other words, but it's not, it's not the same. And yeah, that's probably why all over Europe and everywhere, like there's English-speaking comedy everywhere now. Like English-speaking stand-up is on the rise. Yeah. In any country, like everyone enjoys it, especially now online. Everyone watches like reels and TikToks and stuff from English-speaking comedians, so everyone's really into it, and I think it's partly to do with the language. Yeah. I give you the longest fucking answer. It's like insane. I almost feel bad.
Oh, I've stopped recording. Doesn't matter. So, assuming that you haven't mentioned them already, because it sounds like you might have done, what have been your best and worst gigs?
Oh, no, I haven't actually.
Oh wow! Okay, more extreme.
Genuinely haven't. No, I told you that one horrendous one, but that was just an open mic. That's not that bad. I had one, must have been 2019, where a promoter booked me based on having seen me at Backyard Comedy Club, and he was like, "Well, I have a paid." It was like not much money, but I have a paid gig here in Bexley Heath, which is a rich London suburb for anyone who doesn't know. So this was in January of 2019, because I was doing dry January, so I wasn't drinking at all. And then my girlfriend at the time and I broke up on that day, basically as I was leaving for the gig. So I was heavily depressed. I had to go to Bexley Heath. It's more suitable to driving comedians, like people who have a car. Yeah. So I had to go. I was basically walking through woods and then over like a motorway overpass to this gig, to this sports hall. It was like basically a tennis hall. So incredibly conducive to comedy, like the highest ceiling you've ever seen in your life, super well lit, and just the biggest old Tory audience I've ever seen in my life. And I was depressed already. And I walk in there, but then I was kind of feeling like, you know what, this might be good. Older people usually like my comedy and stuff, like, because I do like World War II references and stuff like that. And then they were there, yeah, so I walked in there, and then there was a bunch of like really depressed club comedians who'd been doing it for 20 years were there, and I was talking to them, and I didn't really enjoy it. But then a really, really, really great comedian walked in as well, who was the headliner of the night. I don't want to name any names. And he came up to me, and I think he mentioned that the head of the Curb, like really big agency, was there that night. Right. And then he came up to me, and he was really nice, and he was like, "I'm really looking forward to your set." And I was like, "You know what? This might be what cheers me up." And then they bring me on. So it was the MC, and then there was a 20-minute opener, and I think then I had to go on to do 10 after a break maybe. And they brought me on, and I did my usual opening joke to just beyond silence. And they looked annoyed that I was even there, right? And I said, like there was the front row was empty, as often happens with gigs like that. But I bet there was a couple, like an older couple in the front row. And they both had like just their arms folded, and they looked up at me, and they were just like, and I plowed ahead. Well, I didn't actually. I didn't know how to deal with it at the time. I could have addressed it. I should have. But I was too new, and I ended up just putting the mic back at 7 minutes, and I was like, fuck this, I'm just leaving. As I walk off stage, I was like, okay, so there was this really good comedian here who just saw this. There was the head of the Curb here who just saw this. The MC brought on the next act. The next act, I can't remember who it was, went on and said, so this is like a classic comedy night. You have the MC who does this and this. You have the opening act who does this and this. And then you have the fucking fish out of water over there. That's what he called me. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go home. I walked to the bar. There was a bar like outside, and I'd ordered a pint already, but it was like the 25th of January at that point. I was like, you know what? No, fucking. I said no. Actually, give me just like a Diet Coke, and I actually managed to finish dry January. But as I was walking back to the station again through the woods, I was like,
yeah,
okay, so my relationship just ended. I just did the worst gig of my life. They called me a fish out of water. I can't even drink. I was walking as I got to the motorway overpass again. I can't tell you how just how tempting that was.
Oh, geez.
You see a lorry driving down underneath there. I was like, it's fucking worthless piece. Just throw yourself off. That was the worst. That was the worst gig I've ever done. Just because of all those different elements.
Well, yeah.
That was horrendous. I never even invoiced for it. I didn't want the money. I never wanted to see the promoter again, who wasn't there that night.
Right.
But he did text me during the gig going, how'd it go? And I was like, yeah, I think everyone's doing really well. But I never asked for the money. And then that promoter is he's a booker promoter. He's also a comedian, a really great comedian and MC himself. Like I saw him a year later or something. It would have been locked down. I don't know, at some point. And I was like, oh my God, I'm on the same bill as him. And as I went on and I had a really good set. And as I came off stage, he came up to me and was like, what's your name again? I really like your set. And I was like, oh my God, he doesn't remember. That's great. So yeah, it worked out in the end. But yeah, that was definitely the worst. And I think with best, it always changes. For me, it tends to be the most recent really great gig that I've done. So the one I did at Dulwich Hamlet when I was in, so that was 3 weeks ago. Yeah. And I was briefly in London again. I did at Dulwich Hamlet, and it was genuinely, partly maybe because they have a lot of regulars, and I didn't want to do the same material I did my first 2 times I did that gig. I went up and I maybe did 50% material. The rest was all ad-libbed, and I had one of the best sets of my life. So that was probably my new favorite one. But like I said, I did 5 minutes at Leicester Square Theatre in front of 500 people in my first year. So obviously that would be up there as well. Yeah. But yeah, it's tough to say. Changes constantly.
How can we find out about you and where you're playing?
Oh, yeah, that'll be a tough one for everyone. Best way to find out where I'm playing is just to follow me on Instagram. It's HUBSMAYR is my Insta handle. Also same one on Twitter. But yeah, I would, if I do gigs that I think are worth promoting, then I promote them on Twitter, on Instagram, and I'll definitely do it for my own shows. Yeah. Like I said, I'm trying to sort it out, but I'm gonna book in as many as I can, and not just to put on a bunch of work in progress shows. Yeah. In London, and then also now with Jamie living in Liverpool, I'll be up north quite a bit as well. So I'll book all around the country. Yeah. So yeah, Instagram. I don't have a link tree because I'm too lazy to set one up. I have a website. That I built like 3 years ago, and I never actually did anything with it. And I'm not going to promote it now because it's just it's so yeah. I need to do some stuff. But yeah, I'm hoping, like, I don't know, like for me personally, like I had a clip of mine go viral that I didn't put up myself. That was put up by the Blackout, and it's just hit 1 million views. Yeah, and I got a shit ton of followers out of it. So I was like, maybe I can finally get some people.
So finally, then, in line with the title of the show, Hubert, what is comedy in a nutshell?
I should have thought about this before. I thought, yeah, you know what, I'll wing this.
Yeah.
What is comedy in a nutshell? I don't know. I think comedy is one of the few art forms that has something for everyone, I think, because everyone has a sense of humor. Some people have really fucked up ones. Some people, everyone has something that they find funny. And I think there's something to find in comedy for everyone. And I would also, I know this is a weird thing to say as a comedian, but I would also recommend to anyone to just go and do an open mic. If they even remotely fancy it, you'll get something out of it, even if it's just the knowledge that that's not for you. But yeah, it's just I think it's the best form of live entertainment there is, and it's also the purest form of live entertainment there is to me personally, because maybe improv, I don't know, it's not my cup of tea, but it's just a guy with a microphone or a girl, and yeah, there's literally just you and the mic, and like. as much as people revere like musicians, I listened to a clip from I think it was from a radio show, and Joe Perry from Aerosmith he was talking to these two comedians on this radio show, and he was just completely in awe of them. So we have the balls to just go out and grab a mic and then just create something out of nothing. They were like, dude, you're in Aerosmith. What are you? Wait, what are you talking about? But he was like, yeah, well, we've studied our songs. Yeah. I think it's like, if in a nutshell, to me, it's the purest form of live entertainment.
Yeah. Hubert, thank you so much. It's been brilliant talking with you. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this.